I recently visited a village in Hebei, just a few hours' drive from the gleaming modern skyline of Beijing. In almost every home, you see them. Brand new, wall-mounted gas furnaces, the shiny crown jewels of a multi-billion-dollar environmental campaign designed to bring back the blue skies. On paper, it looks like a triumph of modernization. You'd expect these homes to be cozy, climate-controlled sanctuaries against the brutal northern winter. But when I stepped inside one small house, the first thing I noticed wasn't the heat. It was the total silence of the gas meter. The digital display was static, showing zero usage. In the center of the room sat an elderly woman, wrapped in so many thick, padded jackets she could barely move her arms. She wasn't watching TV or cooking. She was simply sitting perfectly still on her bed, huddled under a mountain of blankets, trying to trap what little body heat she had left. Outside, the temperature had plummeted to -10 degrees. Inside, the air felt just as biting. I pointed to the high-tech heater on the wall and asked why it wasn't running. She gave me a small, tired smile and held up her hands, red, cracked, and covered in painful chilblains. She didn't talk about carbon footprints or regional environmental targets. She simply told me that turning that dial for a single winter month would eat up her entire annual pension. To her, that furnace wasn't a source of comfort. It was a museum piece, a decorative reminder of a modern life she literally couldn't afford to turn on. It was a striking contradiction. The government had successfully replaced the dirty coal stoves with clean gas, checking every box on the policy list. The air outside was indeed clearer. But inside these homes, the success of the policy looked like a grandmother shivering in the dark because the price of a blue sky was her basic right to stay warm. It makes you wonder, when we calculate the progress of a nation, how do we account for the people left freezing in the shadows of that success? That striking scene, it cuts right to the heart of what we're talking about today. What happens when a massive national energy transition meets the uncompromising reality of a single family's budget?
Today, we're doing a deep dive into China's ambitious coal-to-clean heating project, or CCHP. And this isn't just an environmental policy.
Not at all.
It's a monumental undertaking. It's designed to completely redefine energy use for millions and millions of people in a really compressed time frame.
Yeah, the sources we're looking at really document this incredible speed, but they also show the social challenges it created.
That cost shock, exactly. The one experienced by that woman and so many others. But crucially, what we're also going to explore is the government's strategic pivot, the shift towards, innovative, long-term, technologically advanced solutions to fix those exact problems.
Right. This is a story of policy, a crisis, and then this really deep strategic adaptation.
So let's start at the beginning, the initial phase of this transformation, the CCHP. It's a fascinating case study in just rapid government action.
It is. And before we even get into the outcomes, we have to set the scale. It's almost impossible to overstate. China's reliance on coal, specifically for what's called civil bulk use in northern rural areas, was just immense. It made the country the world's largest coal consumer, and that was the primary driver of the severe air pollution that, we all saw images of.
The winter smog.
Exactly, the smog that just smothered those northern cities, especially during the cold months.
So when we talk about that pollution, it wasn't just big industrial smokestacks.
No, and that's the key point. The specific target of the CCHP was civil bulk coal.
What is that exactly?
It's basically low-quality, unprocessed raw coal, often with high sulfur content. Millions of rural households were burning this directly in very simple, inefficient stoves.
So you have millions of small sources.
Millions, all doing this low-temperature combustion spread across these vast rural areas. And that created disproportionately high levels of PM 2.5, sulfur dioxide, all the things that led to those infamous winter smog events in the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region.
So the government knew that to win the war on air pollution, they had to tackle this fragmented, really small-scale usage.
They had to. It was critical.
That just seems like a coordination challenge of, an almost impossible scale, changing the habits and the entire infrastructure for that many individual households.
It was immense. And the government's response, the CCHP, was launched as a key part of the 2013 Air Pollution Prevention and Control Action Plan.
So it starts in 2013.
It starts sporadically. Between 2013 and 2016, you had pioneers like Beijing launching their own plans, but the policy really, really intensified from 2017 onwards.
Okay, so why 2017? What was the inflection point that took it from a few pilot projects to this full-scale national mobilization?
It was a combination of two things. First, you had tremendous political and administrative pressure on local governments to meet these urgent environmental targets.
The air quality targets.
Right, especially in those key regions. But second, and this is crucial, the central government opened the taps. They provided significant, sustained financial support. And that enabled local administrations to move from just planning to actually installing the hardware on a mass scale. It created this political momentum that just cascaded down the whole system.
So that political will, backed by central funding, that was the engine for the speed.
Absolutely. The system was basically built for rapid deployment. Local governments, facing these strict mandates, often try to exceed their planned goals to, show their commitment.
And the speed was unprecedented.
Completely. By 2020, which is just 4 years after that big push started, over 25 million rural households had been brought into this mega project.
25 million.
Just to put that in perspective, that's roughly the total number of households in a major European country like Spain or Poland.
Yeah.
All transitioned in 4 years.
That is just a staggering logistical achievement. And if we look at Hebei, the province surrounding Beijing where you started your story, the concentration there must have been intense.
It was the epicenter. Hebei alone promoted CCHP to about 8 million rural households by 2020. Beijing itself managed to achieve what they call zero coal coverage in all its plain villages.
So these numbers, they really reflect one of the fastest, most concentrated energy shifts we've seen anywhere in the world in modern times.
No question.
And when you move that fast, the environmental results must have been just as immediate. What was the impact of getting rid of that much dirty fuel so quickly?
The environmental triumphs were immediate and very significant. The CCHP was an exceptionally effective tool for that. The former minister of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment claimed the project contributed about 1/3 to the total air quality improvement in northern China.
A third? That's huge.
It is. You saw this rapid drop in pollutant emissions, PM2.5, SO2, and a dramatic reduction in the number of those heavily polluted days.
And I imagine for the families inside the homes, there was a benefit too.
A critical secondary benefit. Improved indoor air quality. It reduced household exposure to all these harmful pollutants that contribute to respiratory illnesses. The policy worked because it targeted the absolute core of the problem, that civil bulk coal.
So how did they do it? What was the technology they used for this rapid substitution?
Well, it was achieved through what some people call double substitution. Basically, moving away from coal towards two main clean alternatives.
Okay.
The two dominant technological pathways at the start were coal to electricity, or CTE,
right,
and coal to gas, CTG.
Right.
And together, those two models accounted for over 90% of the entire rollout in the north.
And our sources say this choice wasn't made in a vacuum. They had tried other things before that didn't work as well.
That's right. Before 2017, a lot of places tried to promote what they call clean briquettes, a kind of processed, cleaner coal with matched stoves.
And that failed.
It had really disappointing progress. The briquettes were often expensive, they were hard for people to burn efficiently, and frankly, local governments didn't have strong incentives to enforce the switch.
So the move to gas and electricity was a recognition that they needed a full, total fuel replacement to get the results they wanted.
Exactly. And, it's crucial to remember the initial policy focus was almost exclusively nested in that air pollution framework.
It was an environmental policy, first and foremost.
Yes. A means to an environmental end driven by political urgency. So success was measured by environmental indicators.
Right.
How much bulk coal was reduced, the drop in pollutant density, fewer smoggy days.
And things like whether people could afford to run their new heaters.
Unfortunately, no. Indicators related to the recipient's long-term financial well-being or even their heating satisfaction were largely absent from the early policy texts.
Which sounds exactly like what you described as that politics administration-dominated approach. It's designed for speed, for enforcement, but it can miss the local fit, the social nuance.
That's the critical tension. That centralized top-down mechanism was, you could argue, indispensable for enforcing the policy so quickly across such a huge, diverse area.
The political mobilization was the key instrument.
It was. Constantly stressing the political significance, coordinating all these different ministries. That's what moved resources so fast. But while it delivered on the environmental targets, that approach suffered from, let's say, deficient initial policy design.
How did that rigid top-down approach specifically overlook the reality on the ground for the people actually living there?
Well, because the focus was so heavy on the numbers, the quantity of households converted, local officials were basically incentivized to implement the policy in the most rigid, fastest way possible.
Just like a hard burn in the ground.
Exactly. Install the gas or electric heaters, hit your targets. And in doing so, they often overlooked key variables. Like, first, the actual socioeconomic conditions of the people, which, varied wildly between a wealthier area like Beijing and a less developed province like Hebei. And second, they often failed to mandate essential supporting measures.
You mean like basic insulation for the houses?
Precisely. Things like that. So the result was you had this successful rollout of clean technology, but because commercial gas and electricity are just fundamentally more expensive than cheap subsidized coal.
It created an immediate and acute cost conflict.
Yes, especially when you apply it universally to low-income populations. The success of the Blue Skies policy very quickly exposed a massive social equity issue, and that set the stage for the next phase of the whole project, policy adaptation.
And that brings us right to the heart of it and back to the grandmother's story, the affordability crisis. The success in cleaning the air basically uncovered this profound social and economic challenge. It's just a powerful lesson that technology, no matter how clean, can't solve a structural problem if it ignores whether people can actually afford to use it.
The core conflict was just undeniable. For the average rural household, heating with commercial gas and electricity, even with some subsidies, instantly became much, much more expensive than their traditional way of doing things.
The cost shock.
That's what policy analysts called it, an immediate cost shock.
Let's unpack the numbers on that because the data we have is incredibly stark.
It really is. One detailed survey showed that the switch to gas, the CTG project, it nearly doubled the heating expenditure of rural families.
Double.
To put some hard numbers on it, in the Beijing area, where incomes are generally higher, the average heating spending went up by about 1,170 yuan for gas households and 740 yuan for electric households.
It's just significant. But the real measure of the social impact, as you said, is looking at it as a percentage of their income.
Exactly. That's the metric of energy poverty, the ratio of heating costs to household income. That's the number that tells you if a family can actually afford to stay warm without cutting back on food or medicine.
And when you look at it through that lens, the problem goes from being an inconvenience to, for some people, an existential budget crisis.
Precisely. For those gas users in Beijing, the ratio of heating spending to their income changed by over 50%.
50%.
But now let's look at Hebei, the neighboring province, where the grandmother lives. The negative effect was not uniform at all.
Because of that socioeconomic difference.
Massive difference. In Hebei, the increase in that ratio of expenditure to income was a staggering 65.9% change.
Let's just pause on that. 66%. That number is just... It brings us right back to that woman shivering in her unheated home. For a low-income family on a fixed pension, a 66% shift in how much of their budget has to go to heating.
It forces immediate painful trade-offs.
You can't afford both heat and other essentials.
That's the insight the data gives us. The mandatory nature of the program, even with the initial subsidies, clearly intensified energy poverty in those less developed areas.
And it wasn't just income disparity, right?
No, that's a great point. Households in Hebei have much lower incomes, of course. But on top of that, the clean energy prices were actually slightly higher there. Electricity was 6% more, gas was 5% more than in Beijing.
So they're getting hit from both sides.
Both sides. And one more thing, which is crucial for policy design. Households with lower income and, critically, those without any prior house insulation were hit the hardest by far.
Because the heaters just had to run constantly.
Constantly, just to achieve a basic level of comfort, which ballooned the operational costs. So that initial one-size-fits-all policy, driven by speed, it created a really severe social equity issue that threatened the long-term sustainability of the whole project.
But the key to this story really isn't just the problem. It's this systemic response from the government when it was faced with this really severe social feedback. Yeah. How quickly did the system recognize and react to that cost shock?
The feedback loop was surprisingly swift and forceful. It was driven by reports on social media, official internal evaluations, academic analysis.
Well, the whole range of sources.
Yeah, and they all consistently identified poor affordability and an unsustainable reliance on subsidies as the most pressing issues. And that collective feedback pushed the entire policy system to pivot.
And one of the first and most dramatic adjustments came after the gas shortage crisis in 2017.
That's right. The aggressive rollout of coal to gas created this enormous unmanaged spike in demand for natural gas.
It stressed the whole national supply network.
It did. And that led to an immediate, vital adjustment: pace modulation. The central government deliberately slowed the promotion pace in 2018.
They basically hit the brakes to manage the complexity. That shows real flexibility.
It does. It was a direct signal to curb that runaway behavior from local governments who were just chasing conversion targets. For instance, Hebei itself cut its target from 2.55 million households in 2017 down to 1.8 million in 2018.
And that pause gave the energy supply and the infrastructure time to catch up.
To stabilize, yes. But beyond just slowing down, they also had to move beyond that exclusive focus on gas and electricity, which had proven so problematic.
This is the second big adjustment.
It is technological expansion. Before 2018, the focus was really narrow. But from 2018 onwards, the central government explicitly broadened the range of technological models they were encouraging.
A recognition that one size does not fit all.
Exactly. A recognition that no single solution could fit China's vast, diverse rural conditions. And that strategic shift prepared the ground for more sophisticated, high-efficiency technologies, which I'm sure we'll get to.
But in the immediate term, the most direct way to help families like the one I saw was through subsidies.
Substantial, well-structured subsidy schemes.
Yes.
The government showed a really clear commitment to mitigating the social consequences of the transition.
So let's detail those, because they were the immediate lifeline against that cost shock. How did they actually lower the price for the person at the end of the line?
The subsidies were very targeted and structured around consumption limits. So for electricity users, the government offered a subsidy of 20.2 yuan per kilowatt hour for off-peak use, capped at 10,000 kilowatt hours a year.
Which encourages people to run their heating at night when the grid has more capacity.
Exactly. For gas users, the subsidy was 0.38 yuan per cubic meter, up to 820 cubic meters. And even for those households still on clean coal, there was a subsidy of 200 yuan per ton.
And provinces added their own support on top of that.
They did. Some provincial cities, like in Shaanxi, took the step of reducing baseline electricity prices by up to 40% during the winter heating period. This combination of central and local financing was essential for stabilizing household budgets and making sure the new heaters were actually used.
Instead of being museum pieces on the wall.
Right. And this marks a real transition from a purely environmental mandate to a multi-objective policy.
Yeah.
One that actively sought to balance the environmental gains with the socioeconomic stability of these communities.
That analysis really highlights the cost of that initial speed. The subsidies address the immediate pain, they bought time, but they clearly aren't a sustainable long-term solution for an entire nation's heating system.
You know, they're a bridge, not a destination.
Which must have been the strategic driver for the next phase. Moving away from reliance on expensive fuels and towards super efficient technology and integrated resource use.
That pivot towards long-term efficiency is the core of the CCHP's evolution. The government recognized that sustaining those blue skies required a permanent solution, one that wasn't dependent on perpetually high subsidies or volatile global energy prices.
So the emphasis shifted from just swapping fuels,
Maximizing energy efficiency and leveraging these massive, previously untapped domestic energy resources.
Okay, let's focus on the key technology here. Heat pumps. This has been a game changer globally, but China seems to have a unique, almost built-in advantage.
It absolutely does. Heat pumps are critical for decarbonization everywhere, but China possesses a massive, unique, competitive edge.
Which is?
It's already the world's largest manufacturer of heat pumps for buildings. They produce about 35% of all units sold worldwide.
So that industrial capacity isn't just an economic strength, it's a strategic national asset.
It is. It allows for a rapid, secure scale-up to meet this huge domestic demand without relying on foreign supply chains.
And in the context of their clean energy goals, what role do heat pumps play?
A fundamental one. In the projections, the announced pledges scenario, heat pumps are expected to account for around 30% of direct emissions reductions for heating by 2050.
Because they're so efficient.
Their efficiency is the key. Unlike a gas or electric resistance heater that turns 1 unit of energy into, less than 1 unit of heat, a heat pump typically generates 3, 4, or even more units of heat for every single unit of electricity it consumes.
Because it's moving heat, not creating it from scratch.
Exactly.
But we already established that electricity is expensive. So how do heat pumps become genuinely cost competitive in the long run against, say, subsidized natural gas?
It's a calculation based on lifetime operational cost, not just the upfront price tag. And yes, the upfront capital cost is high. An air-to-water unit can be 3 or 4 times more expensive than a basic electric heater.
But the operational efficiency pays for itself over time.
It rapidly offsets that initial investment. We're already seeing this in the field. In rural Beijing, for example, air-to-air heat pumps are already the most cost-competitive heating option over their entire lifetime.
Even compared to the old cheap coal stoves.
Even compared to those. It means that over 10 or 15 years, the savings on the power bill more than cover that initial cost difference.
And does this apply at the industrial scale as well, for things like district heating?
Precisely. Take industrial heat pumps. They might be 6 times more expensive upfront than a new gas boiler. Yet they're nearly cost competitive with even subsidized coal boilers over their lifetime.
Wow, why?
Because their much greater efficiencies just outweigh that initial capital gap and the fuel price differences. This superior long-term cost effectiveness is what elevates heat pumps from just another clean tech option to a strategic centerpiece of the country's energy future.
So it fulfills the need for both environmental goals and that long-term affordability. It's really a demonstration of industrial capacity driving a green transition.
That's right. But the strategy doesn't even stop there with just the efficiency of the heat pump itself. It extends into resource optimization.
Okay.
And this is maybe the most fascinating and powerful strategic move. The large-scale integration and recycling of thermal energy that is currently just wasted.
You mean waste heat?
Exactly. We're talking about maximizing the use of existing heat that would otherwise just be vented into the atmosphere or dumped into rivers.
So it's a fundamental shift in thinking. Treating waste heat not as pollution, but as a vast, untapped energy resource.
It's exactly that. And large-scale heat pumps connected to district heating networks are the key to unlocking it. They enable the recycling and reuse of massive amounts of low-grade waste heat from all sorts of sources.
Which enhances energy security and brings down costs for the long term.
Right. Let's look at the sheer scale of what's available. First, from power plants and industry. Sources estimate that as much as 650 gigawatts of heat pump capacity could be deployed by 2050 just to harness waste heat from thermal power plants, nuclear plants, and heavy industry.
650 gigawatts, that's like adding hundreds of major power plants worth of heat to the system without burning a single extra piece of coal.
That's a great way to put it. It's a massive, reliable energy source just waiting to be tapped.
What about sources closer to cities and towns?
That brings us to the second major source, wastewater. The thermal energy in the water coming out of wastewater treatment plants was estimated to be about 1.5 exajoules in 2021.
An exajoule is a lot.
It's an astronomical amount of energy. It's enough to heat tens of millions of homes for an entire winter. And we already see this working. In Shijiazhuang and Hebei, 7,000 homes are already being heated using industrial wastewater heat pumps.
So it's not just a theory, it's being deployed at scale right now.
Right. And the third source is geothermal energy. China is also moving strategically into this, focusing not just on shallow ground source heat pumps, but on deep and medium depth sources.
How deep are we talking?
2 to 3 kilometers below ground. At those depths, temperatures can get up to 80 or 90 degrees Celsius.
And that's much more efficient for heating.
Significantly more efficient. It provides a stable, low-carbon base-load heat supply. And again, this is already being used successfully in cities like Shan. It's a strategic optimization of the entire energy infrastructure.
And this technological shift from heat pumps to waste heat, it naturally extends from individual rural homes to China's core heavy infrastructure, like the district heating systems in the big northern cities.
That's right. And China is already the biggest district heating market in the world.
Yeah.
So decarbonizing this sector is absolutely essential for their climate targets.
Where's the immediate focus for integrating heat pumps there?
In light industries. Think machinery, food, textiles. These sectors are optimal because, one, about 60% of their energy use is already electric, and two, their process temperature needs are typically below 200 degrees Celsius, which is a perfect fit for current large-scale heat pump tech.
But the most innovative part seems to be how they're making the existing pipe network itself more efficient. You mentioned lowering the return temperatures.
Yes, this is a classic operational efficiency reform. Traditionally, district heating networks in China operate with pretty high return temperatures. The water coming back to the heating plant is often 40 to 60 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
By using large-scale heat pumps and absorption heat exchangers, they can lower that return temperature significantly, maybe down to 20 degrees.
Why does that one detail matter so much?
It's the opposite of a minor detail. It's an engineering breakthrough for existing infrastructure. When you lower that return temperature, you dramatically increase the temperature difference between the supply and return water.
And that means?
Two things. First, you can deliver the same amount of heat with less water, which saves electricity on the pumps. But more importantly, it greatly increases the transport capacity of the entire existing pipeline network.
How much?
Our sources show that by getting those return temperatures down to around 20 degrees, the total capacity of the network could increase by up to 70%.
70% without laying a single new pipe.
Exactly. The economic and infrastructure savings are immense.
So the future vision is this integrated, hyper-efficient system driven by waste heat.
It is. In northern Hebei, where the whole project started and the challenges were most acute, projections show that heat recovered by heat pumps from renewables and waste heat could account for a massive 80% of the district heat supply by 2050.
That's the end goal of this strategic optimization, a combination of manufacturing, waste heat recovery, and infrastructure reform to get to clean, affordable heating for the long haul.
This technological leap is really impressive, but as you said, it only solves half the problem. If the system is super efficient, but the cost structure or the management is still inaccessible, the individual user still loses.
Right back to the grandmother on her fixed pension.
So the third crucial element has to be making sure the system is financially and socially resilient. And that requires not just new technology, but new governance structures and market mechanisms that guarantee equity.
The global experience with energy transitions shows that a people-centered approach is fundamental, right?
It's foundational. You have to emphasize local engagement, equitable access, and benefit sharing. It's the necessary antidote to that early, rigid, top-down approach. The goal is to alleviate energy poverty and foster real, sustained economic prosperity in rural areas.
So the initial problem was that policy was dictated from above. The solution must involve genuine bottom-up input and collective buy-in. What models are they looking at?
The Rural Energy Cooperative model is the globally recognized way to do this. These are member-owned organizations that collectively manage energy production, heat, and consumption.
And what are the benefits of a cooperative model in this context?
They're huge. They mitigate that not in my backyard or NMB attitude, because residents become shareholders. They benefit financially. Cooperatives also improve energy access in remote areas. They generate local jobs for maintenance and management. And crucially, they keep the economic benefits in the community.
Instead of sending profits to some distant centralized utility.
Exactly. It fosters a truly inclusive energy system. And in China, the government is actively encouraging this kind of innovation. Regions like Zhejiang and Inner Mongolia are exploring these collective energy ownership models.
So how does that collective model translate into direct, practical relief for the villager who was previously shivering under a blanket?
It fundamentally changes their relationship with their energy bill. Under this model, the village collective acts as the investment and management entity. Maybe they install and maintain a large, efficient heat pump system powered by local solar panels.
So the individual villager isn't facing those high, unpredictable commercial rates anymore.
Right. They become a shareholder or a fixed-rate user. They're freed from those immediate high operational cost concerns. They can even benefit from surplus income generated by the system.
Which enhances the state's capacity to deliver this service and ensures energy access is stable and affordable, especially for aging populations on fixed pensions.
Exactly. This institutional shift is a vital step toward long-term affordability, equity, and even rural revitalization.
Okay, so the shift to electricity-based heating, like heat pumps, solves the efficiency problem but creates a new one: grid management.
A huge new challenge. When everyone turns on their heat during the coldest evening in winter, the electrical grid experiences these massive, potentially debilitating load spikes.
And the strategic response to that has to involve sophisticated power market reforms.
It does. The primary tool here is demand-side management, mainly using what are called time of use, or 2U, tariffs, and implementing flexibility markets.
Let's break down the time of use tariffs first. The peak valley mechanism. How does that actually change when people use power?
It's a powerful financial incentive. It makes electricity prices vary throughout the day to encourage consumption during off-peak hours, typically at night when industrial demand is low.
So it's much cheaper to run your heater at 2 a.m. than at 7 p.m.
Much cheaper. For regions with a high peak valley load difference, national guidance says the price ratio must be at least 4-to-1.
4 times more expensive at peak hours.
At least. And this financial signal allows heat pump users to really reduce their bills. By optimizing their heating schedules to run when electricity is cheapest, they can cut their energy bills by up to 10%.
That brings us to the more advanced concept: flexibility markets and virtual power plants. This seems critical for handling the sheer scale of all this new electric heating.
It's absolutely critical. China is strategically advancing these flexibility markets. A national policy from late 2021 expanded these ancillary services markets, promoting the inclusion of load aggregators and virtual power plants, or VPPs.
And a VPP is essentially what?
It's a highly sophisticated cloud-based control system. It aggregates and manages thousands of small distributed energy resources, like all those rural heat pumps, solar panels, and storage systems, and it treats them as if they were a single controllable power plant.
So these aggregators can bundle the flexibility of thousands of small heat pumps and sell that flexibility back to the grid.
Precisely. By 2030, these entities are slated to be able to fully participate in spot market transactions. This lets them provide critical support to the grid, like load shifting and frequency control.
So if the grid is straining, the VPP can temporarily dial down thousands of heat pumps by just a little bit to ease the load.
And significantly, the owners of the VPP, which could be those village cooperatives we were just talking about, can generate revenue by doing this.
So the heat pump goes from being just a passive energy consumer that costs money
to being an active revenue-generating resource for the community.
And that model addresses the long-term financial stability that the initial subsidy program never could. And all of this is enabled by thermal energy storage.
DES is the final essential piece. Combining heat pumps with thermal storage like hot water tanks in homes or larger centralized water pits lets the system decouple electricity use from heat delivery.
So you can make heat when power is cheap and green, like from solar during the day.
Store it cheaply as hot water, and then use that stored heat during the evening peak when electricity is most expensive. It improves resilience, ensures affordability, and helps integrate more renewables into the grid. It's a truly comprehensive plan.
What we've really tracked in this deep dive is a government taking on one of the most massive and complex policy challenges in modern energy history, and then strategically adapting its approach across these distinct phases based on real-world, often very acute, feedback.
Exactly. The initial phase prioritized immediate environmental results through speed. It worked, it displaced the coal, but it created that unintended social cost of energy poverty.
Right.
But the subsequent phases show this calculated evolution. Addressing affordability through subsidies and innovative financing like collective ownership, and then leveraging that immense domestic manufacturing capacity to pivot to high-efficiency heat pumps and waste heat integration.
So it's less about a single policy and more about a continuous, multi-pronged evolution.
An evolution that integrates technology, market reforms, and local governance innovation.
We started with that image of a grandmother shivering next to a sophisticated, unused gas heater because the cost was just prohibitive. The strategic path forward focused on these ultra-efficient heat pumps, integrated with massive waste heat streams, managed by flexible power markets, and owned through equitable collective models, is designed to ensure that the success of the Blue Skies initiative doesn't come at the cost of warm homes.
It's about ensuring those basic human needs are met alongside the national climate objectives. The ultimate goal really is to balance energy security, environmental goals, and social equity, all through this systemic strategic optimization.